Hello.
My stepson told his girlfriend I was pathetic and holding on to him like a lifeline. So I packed his things and sent him to his mom's cramped apartment with her 3 kids. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. My name is Daniel. I'm 48 years old. 11 years ago, I stood at an altar beside Laura, believing I was stepping into love, into partnership, into something worth all the years I had spent alone. She was radiant that day, and behind her in the pews, Justin sat stiff in his suit, his teenage face unreadable. He was her son from her first marriage, a boy on the edge of manhood, carrying the kind of bitterness that comes from a father who breaks promises before they're even spoken. His biological father lived several states away. He had remarried, started a new family, and then another after that. He appeared in Justin's life rarely, a Christmas once, maybe a birthday phone call half a year late. Sometimes he sent a gift, something flashy but hollow, a gadget too expensive for his lifestyle, a signed jersey from a team Justin didn't even follow, always paired with excuses about why he couldn't stay. The man's shadow lingered in every corner, not through presence, but through absence. I made a decision early. I wasn't going to compete with him. I wasn't going to try to be a replacement. I told myself, just be there. Show up. Keep showing up. Maybe presence could do what blood hadn't. So I did. When Justin needed a ride to practice, it was me waiting in the parking lot. Headlights dimmed, hands tapping the steering wheel until his figure appeared. I was the one who drove him home from away games, listening as he sulked about his performance, or bragged when he'd scored, or sat in silence, headphones clamped over his ears like a barricade. I never complained. I thought patience was the language that would earn me a place in his life. Homework was the same story. Laura often worked late shifts, and Justin's grades slid when no one paid attention. I sat beside him at the kitchen table, explaining equations I hadn't touched since my own youth, sounding out passages with him line by line. Sometimes he muttered that I wasn't a real teacher, or that his dad would never bother him with this stuff. I swallowed it and kept going. I thought one day, maybe he'd remember that I didn't give up on him. I gave where I could. A new pair of shoes when he was too embarrassed to wear the old ones. Money slipped into his hand when his friends made plans he couldn't afford. Fees for camps, sports equipment, trips he wanted to join so he wouldn't feel left out. My wallet became the quiet foundation of his teenage years, and though he rarely said thank you, I convinced myself gratitude was there, buried beneath his silence. Even when his indifference cut deep, I told myself not to take it personally. He was young. He was lost. I thought if I just kept steady, time would soften him. One evening still burns in my memory. He had taken my truck without asking, desperate to impress the boys he called his friends. He spun it too fast on gravel and clipped a fence. By the time I saw the damage, the side panel was bent, paint scraped raw. He stood there pale, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I looked him in the eye and said only this: the truck can be fixed. The important thing is you're okay. His shoulders loosened in disbelief, as though kindness confused him more than rage. I wanted him to remember my restraint, not my anger. I wanted him to know I cared more about him than about the machine. Years rolled on that way. Justin grew taller, his voice deepened, his moods sharpened. He grew cold, sometimes openly dismissive. Still, I kept showing up. Christmas mornings, I watched his excitement shift from toys to electronics, from simple gifts to expensive ones. Every year the price tags grew heavier, but I paid them without hesitation. Laura sometimes warned me not to spoil him, that his father should contribute more. But the checks from his father came late or not at all, and when they arrived, they were insultingly small. A token gesture at fatherhood, nothing more. I told myself I wouldn't let Justin suffer for another man's negligence. Vacations, school trips, the little extras that make youth feel less hollow. All of it came from me. I covered the bills quietly, consistently. I was building a life for him brick by brick, telling myself that one day, when he was older, he would look back and see who had truly been there, that he would see me. But gratitude was rare. More often than not, I was invisible. When he introduced me to his friends, it was simply, This is my mom's husband. That word, husband, stung like a knife. Not stepdad, not even Daniel, just a label that kept me at arm's length. Still, I endured. Because when you love someone, you endure. And I did love him, though he wasn't my blood. I loved him as fiercely as I knew how, and I convinced myself that was enough. I believed, foolishly, that loyalty and sacrifice would one day outweigh absence and neglect. I believed presence mattered more than blood. For 11 years, I carried that belief like a torch in the dark. And though the fire sometimes flickered, I never let it die. I told myself, one day he will see me. One day he will understand what I gave, what I built, what I sacrificed. But I was wrong. When Justin turned 21, something shifted. It wasn't sudden. Not like a storm that rips through overnight. It was gradual. Small cracks forming in the walls I had built, hairline fractures that at first I told myself were nothing. But over time, those cracks grew. And then the whole structure came crashing down. At 21, Justin was legally a man, but emotionally he was still the boy who had been shielded, funded, carried on my back. Except now, he was also discovering the man who had abandoned him, his biological father. Suddenly, the figure who had only appeared on holidays, who sent gifts instead of love, became interesting again. He started spending more weekends with him, traveling out of state, staying longer each time. When he came back home, he smelled of cologne I hadn't bought, wore clothes I hadn't paid for, and carried himself with an arrogance that was new. First, I welcomed it. Foolishly, I thought maybe reconnecting with his father would help him settle old wounds. I told myself, if he gets what he needs from that man, maybe he won't look at me like I'm just a placeholder. But that hope dissolved quickly. The more time he spent with his father, the colder he became with me. Thank yous vanished completely. He stopped acknowledging even the smallest things, the groceries I stocked, the bills I paid, the rides I offered. Everything I gave became invisible, expected, like running water or electricity. He treated me less like a man and more like a service. The first real sting came when he started bringing his girlfriend, Kylie, to the house. She was bright, pretty, full of laughter. But her presence exposed truths I hadn't wanted to face. Justin would brag to her about the things he had, the trips he went on, the car parked in our driveway. But he never once said I had provided them. Instead, he smirked and said things like, "Yeah, I've got a stepdad who pays for everything. Comes in handy." The first time I heard it, I laughed nervously, waiting for him to correct himself, to add some warmth to it. But he didn't. He said it again, louder, with pride, as if my sacrifices were a joke, a convenient credit card attached to his life. Laura saw my face that night. She pulled me aside and whispered, "Ignore it. He's young. He doesn't mean it that way." But I knew better. Words reveal truths people try to hide. And his truth was simple. To him, I was a wallet, a resource, not a father, not even a man to respect. The cracks widened. He started coming home late, treating the house like a hotel. He didn't tell us where he'd been, didn't ask permission, didn't thank us for anything. If I tried to set a rule, his eyes slid to Laura, waiting for her to override me. And too often, she did. "He's an adult now," she would say. "Let him make his own choices." But somehow, those adult choices were still paid for by my bank account. I bit my tongue more times than I can count. I told myself not to pick fights, not to sour the air in my own home. But the weight of it pressed heavier each day. Then came the moment that shattered the last illusion I had left. It was a late evening. I had just come home from work, exhausted, drained, the kind of day where you want only silence and rest. I walked past the living room and paused. Justin's voice drifted from upstairs, loud enough that I could hear. He was on the phone, laughing. I froze, listening, and I wish I hadn't. He was talking to Kylie. His words carried down the staircase, casual but cruel. He said, "Yeah, don't worry. Daniel's pathetic. He clings to me like a lifeline, like he's desperate for me to call him dad or something. I just let him pay for stuff. Easy. Pathetic. Clinging. Desperate." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I stood there in the hallway, my hands trembling, my throat dry. 11 years of labor, of sacrifice, of steady presence. And that was how he defined me. Not as a man who stood in the gap. Not as someone who showed up when his real father didn't. Just a pathetic figure, clinging for scraps of acknowledgement. Couldn't breathe. My body felt heavy, as if every dollar I had ever spent on him was pressing down, suffocating me. I waited for Laura to speak, for her to defend me. She had overheard enough of these conversations over the years. She had seen the disrespect. This was the moment she should have stood up. But when I told her later what I had heard, she only sighed. She said, "He's just venting. Don't take it so seriously. He doesn't mean it." But I knew he meant every word. Cruelty spoken in laughter is still cruelty. And Laura's silence was worse than his insult, because in her silence she gave permission. She told me, without saying it outright, that my humiliation was acceptable as long as the house stayed peaceful. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my own breathing. I thought of every late bill I had paid, every weekend I had spent working overtime so Justin wouldn't fall behind his peers, every moment I had chosen restraint over rage. And it all seemed laughable, not because it was meaningless, but because I had been blind enough to believe it would matter. That was the night my pride cracked. I realized I had been carrying a boy who didn't want to be carried, paying for a man who mocked me for paying, living in a house where my presence was tolerated but never respected. The humiliation was total, and from that humiliation, a decision began to grow, quiet at first but certain. I would not live as a man defined by another's contempt. I would not keep giving to someone who spit in my face. And if Laura couldn't or wouldn't defend me, then I would defend myself. The seed of my decision was planted that night, in the silence of our bedroom, in the hollow echo of Justin's laughter upstairs. The man I had been for 11 years, patient, forgiving, endlessly giving, began to die in that silence. And something colder, sharper, truer began to take his place. The morning after I overheard Justin's words, something in me was gone. It wasn't anger, not the kind that burns fast and fades. No, this was colder, like the final embers of a fire that has consumed everything it can. What remained was ash, still hot, but silent. I didn't storm upstairs and shout. I didn't break down in front of Laura. Instead, I moved with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. For 11 years, I had carried a burden in silence. That silence had turned me into a ghost in my own house. Now it was time to let silence speak for me in return. I waited until the house was empty. Laura had gone to work, and Justin had left with Kylie, probably to flaunt what I had provided as though it were his own. I walked into his room, a room I had furnished, painted, repaired countless times. Posters peeling from the walls, clothes tossed carelessly across the floor, an expensive gaming console blinking on the desk. All of it funded by me. I took out boxes from the garage. One by one, I began packing his things. Not in rage, not carelessly. Neatly. Shirts folded, games stacked, shoes paired. I moved with the precision of a man reclaiming his house. Each item I placed into the box was another memory of my labor. Every dollar I had poured into him, sitting now in cardboard coffins. By the time I finished, his room looked bare. The walls echoed. It no longer looked like a boy's sanctuary. It looked like what it always had been. A space I provided, nothing more. That evening, Justin came home. He walked into his room and froze at the sight of the boxes. His voice cracked with disbelief. "What the hell is this?" I stood in the doorway, calm as a judge. "Your things are packed. You're moving in with your mother." His eyes widened. "What are you talking about? This is my house." I shook my head. "No, this is my house. You've treated it like a hotel, treated me like a wallet. Now it's time for you to live in a place where respect isn't optional. Your mother has a home. You can live there." He laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was panic dressed in arrogance. "You can't just throw me out. You're supposed to support me. You've always supported me." "That's over." My voice was low, steady. "You're a man now, Justin. You wanted freedom from me? You have it. along with freedom from my money. His face twisted, red with rage. This is betrayal. You're supposed to be family. That word, family, struck me harder than I expected. Family had been the excuse for every sacrifice I'd made. And now he wielded it like a we*p*n, as if family meant I owed him endless devotion without respect. Laura came home to chaos. She found us in the hallway, voices sharp, boxes stacked against the wall. Her face drained when she realized what I had done. "Daniel," she whispered. "What is this?" I turned to her. "It's the end of my patience." Justin exploded before she could answer. "He's throwing me out. He's abandoning me." Laura's eyes filled with tears. She reached for me, pleading, "You can't do this. He's just a boy. He doesn't know what he's saying sometimes." I cut her off. "He's not a boy. He's 21. Old enough to drink, old enough to drive, old enough to mock me to his girlfriend. Old enough to live without me." She shook her head, desperate. "Please, Daniel, don't do this. You'll destroy our family." At that, I pulled out what I had prepared. From my desk drawer, I retrieved a folder, thick with receipts, bills, statements. I laid them on the table like evidence in a trial. Tuition payments, sports fees, vacations, car repairs, allowances, line after line of numbers, each one signed with my name, my bank account. I looked at Laura, my voice cold. "Do you see this? 11 years of sacrifice. 11 years of me carrying him while his real father vanished. And for what? To be called pathetic. To be mocked. To be used. No more." Her lips trembled. "But he's your son." "No." I slammed the folder shut. "He's not my son. He's his father's son. Let that man take responsibility for once in his life. Let Justin learn what loyalty really costs." Justin stood there, pale, speechless. Rage flickered in his eyes, but beneath it I saw fear. For the first time, he realized I wasn't bluffing. Within the week, he was gone. He moved into his mother's cramped 2-bedroom apartment, already overflowing with her 3 younger children from her new marriage. I handed him his keys, his boxes, and nothing else. No money, no promises, no support. He cursed me as he left, called me bitter, called me cruel. Laura wept, begged me to reconsider, said I had shattered the home we built. But I knew better. The home had been broken long before, chipped away by silence, by her excuses, by his contempt. Days later, his mother sent me a message. She wrote, "I don't have enough money or space. Can you please take him back?" I stared at the screen, then typed the only reply that mattered. "He's not my problem anymore." I set the phone down and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not joy, not relief, something quieter, heavier. Freedom laced with sorrow. Because here's the truth. Cutting him off didn't just sever him from me. It severed me from the man I used to be, the man who believed patience could earn respect, the man who thought love could be built on sacrifice alone. That man was gone, and in his place stood someone colder, but truer. I had chosen myself for the first time in 11 years, and there was no going back. A month passed. Silence settled over the house in a way I hadn't felt in years. No footsteps slamming up the stairs, no doors rattling from his anger, no late-night voices echoing down the hall. The air itself felt lighter, as though his contempt had been another weight pressing against the walls. But silence has a way of carrying its own message. In the quiet, I began to hear things I hadn't before. The depth of Laura's sighs, the nervous pacing of her footsteps, the way she looked at me with eyes that said, "You've gone too far," even when her lips stayed closed. Justin, meanwhile, was unraveling. News reached me through scraps, whispers from neighbors, brief updates from Laura, the occasional rumor from one of his friends. He had taken a part-time job stocking shelves at a grocery store. The boy who once bragged about my money now folded uniforms and clocked in for minimum wage. He was sleeping on a friend's couch some nights, rotating between overstuffed apartments and his mother's crowded home. One evening, a letter came. Not a text, not an email, a letter in his uneven handwriting. The paper was wrinkled, the ink smudged, I read it at the kitchen table while Laura hovered, watching my face. You abandoned me, he wrote. After everything. You walked out on me when I needed you most. You ruined my future. I'll never forgive you. Those words should have cut deep. But they didn't. Not the way he imagined. Because as I read them, my eyes drifted to the desk drawer where I kept another piece of paper. A drawing he had made years ago, back when he was still small, back when hope still lived between us. 2 stick figures, one taller, one shorter, holding hands. And above them, scrawled in a child's uneven letters, me and Dad. I kept the 2 papers side by side that night. His childish drawing and his bitter letter. 2 versions of the same boy. One who saw me as a father even if by choice, not blood. And another who saw me only as a man who failed to keep giving when gratitude ran dry. I stared at them until the lines blurred. Which one was true? Which version of him had ever been real? Laura cried quietly that night. She told me Justin was struggling, that he looked thinner, tired, worn down by the weight of a life he wasn't prepared to carry. She begged me to reconsider just this once, to help him back onto his feet until he could manage on his own. Her voice cracked, her eyes pleading. I shook my head. If I step in now, nothing changes. He learns nothing. He'll believe he can spit in my face and still be fed. She turned away, tears streaking down her cheeks. He's our son, she whispered. No, I said. He's his father's son. Let his father carry him. But his father never did. Of course he didn't. That man had built a life on escape, on letting others carry the weight he abandoned. I had filled the gap for 11 years. Now, with me gone, Justin was left staring at the truth. The man he idolized was hollow, and the man he mocked had finally walked away. Weeks turned into months. Justin's friends grew tired of carrying him, and his mother's small apartment strained under his presence. I heard he moved from couch to couch, taking shifts at whatever job would hire him, his once bright plans shrinking into survival. Sometimes Laura would tell me stories. How he looked at her with eyes full of regret but no words to match it. How he tried to call his father and was met with silence. How he avoided me entirely, too proud to face the man he had burned. And me? I carried on. I paid my bills, went to work, lived in a house that finally felt like mine. But at night, when the silence pressed too hard, I would open that drawer again. I would lay the 2 papers side by side. The drawing, me and Dad. The letter, you abandoned me. 2 truths that could never live in the same world. Which one was him? Which one was me? I don't know anymore. What I do know is this. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself with contempt, with arrogance, with the belief that love and money were endless, owed, unquestionable. He tested the foundation I had built until it cracked. He mocked the hand that held him up. And when that hand finally let go, he fell. It wasn't betrayal. It was consequence. The house remains quiet now. Laura still moves around me like a shadow, torn between loyalty to her son and the man she married. Sometimes I catch her staring at me as though she doesn't recognize who I've become. But she is wrong. I haven't changed. I've only stopped pretending. For 11 years I gave. I bled myself dry in the hope of being seen, respected, remembered. And for 11 years I was treated as less than nothing. Now, for the first time, I've said yes to myself. And that yes feels like the only honest decision of my life. So I leave you with this question, not out of doubt, but out of truth. Was I wrong? Was I cruel for finally cutting him off? For refusing to destroy myself to save a boy who saw me only as a wallet? Or was this the first time I demanded the respect I had earned? The first time I let consequence do the teaching? Tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done?
Bye-bye.